Okay. So now we're going to listen to Edward Gray. Edward Gray is research infrastructure coordinator at Humanum, the French research infrastructure in digital humanities, and the officer for national coordination at DARIAH-HR. He's currently on the digital board for the social humanities open marketplace, discovery platform for digital humanities and charity born from the SSHOC project. The title of his presentation is Adapting English Language Pedagogy to Cultural Heritage and Digital Humanities in France. Results from using the IIIF online training workshop with future cultural heritage engineers, librarians, and archivists.
All right, thank you so much. I wanted to start by thanking once again the wonderful DARIAH-HR team and especially the University of Rijeka for hosting us here today. It's always a pleasure to come to Croatia, and it's really great to be here. So today I want to talk to you about something that is not my normal reason to come and speak to DARIAH people. I work in DARIAH, I work with Humanum and various European projects, but I also have a side hustle. And that side hustle is teaching English at the École Nationale des Chartes, where I myself am a graduate of the program. And I came into this class because most things in my life work because I speak English. So because I speak English, I have this job. Because I speak English, I teach English. Everything comes from that simple fact. So the École des Chartes is a French grande école specializing in the science of cultural heritage. Basically, that is where the sort of top flight of the archivists and museum conservators and librarians are trained. It's been around for 200 years, a very long time, and it's very, very French. So in 2006, of course, there weren't any computers in 1821, but in 2006, they started a new master's program called the Technologie numérique appliquée à l'histoire, or Digital Technologies Applied to History. I was a member of the 12th graduating class, and we are now up to 14. What's really interesting about this program is it's a transversal program. So the TNASH program, it trains people that become archivists, but also those that become librarians. And if you don't see the difference, ask an archivist or a librarian if they're not different, and you will get lots of very strong responses. And of course, research engineers that go into work in labs, and then those, of course, that go into work in private spheres as well, whether at electronic archiving companies as well as data management. So the first year is very classical. It's a study of sources. You can have either an archives or a books and media focus. But the second year is where it starts to get interesting. And this is where it starts to focus on digital methods, data manipulation, database management, programming, web development, all these sorts of things. But there's also English involved. And this is where I come in. And how does it work? I mean, all of you know, most technical things, the doc gets written in English. You need English to move forward. And the French are famous, with all due respect to the French colleagues in the room, the French are famous for not being the most English-speaking folks on planet Earth. So this is where it comes in with Anglais, langue de l'informatique, or English, the language of computer sciences. And the number one thing when I was asked to teach this class that I came into thinking is, I want this to be useful. I don't like to have my time wasted. I don't want to waste the time of my students. So how can I teach something that will be useful, recognizing that in some cases they may never really use English again. Some of them may be confronted with English in their day-to-day uses. There are people that are going to become archivists, librarians, and research engineers. How do I do something that is useful and reaches the maximum number? And I decided to focus on the daily practical uses of English that students may encounter in their professional lives. English is a prerequisite to join this master's course. So I'm not going to focus on grammar. I'm not a grammarian. I'm a historian by profession. I like to talk about old bits of paper, but talking about according the different tenses is something that makes you want to jump out of a window. So it's no fun for me and no fun for the students. So I take this basic fact that they're supposed to already have a certain level of English, and I decide, okay, how can I evaluate them? I need to evaluate their reading and oral comprehension to make sure they understand what's happening, whether they're reading it or hearing it. But I also need to make sure that they can compose, whether it's written or oral. And the assignments vary from how to present oneself. So very typical things that we see here in the book of abstracts, how to present yourselves, how to write a conference abstract, how to do the old elevator speech to present who you are and what you do in the space of about 2 minutes. General English language academic etiquette, how to send an email. You don't want to send an email to someone and address them by Mr. whatever when they're doctor. That could lead to some issues. Also, how conferences are structured, as well as descriptions of the European research ecosystem. Because what is a work package anyhow? When you've not been, inducted into the arcane arts of European research, you're not going to know what these things are, and it becomes useful moving forward in your career. But the major project for this semester, and the reason I'm here to talk to you today, is a self-driven training session focused on IIIF. I noticed, because I'm also very much involved in our alumni association, I'm the president of our alumni association, and more job descriptions are asking for competence in IIIF. And I noticed this is something that was currently missing from the program when I was hired on to teach English. I said, this is how I can, do something that will be useful, that will give students familiarity they need to move forward, but at the same time, keep them learning English. So IIIF, I'll go over briefly for those of you that don't know, it's a really fantastic technology. They speak a lot about ending silos of information. So a silo of information is the sense of you have your cultural heritage institution, we'll say the BNF, they have lots of digitized images that are really great, but I have to use the BNF website to get access to them. What if I want to use them in cooperation with something at the Stadsbibliothek or something that is at the British Library? How do I make these resources come together and communicate? IIIF is the framework that allows you to do this. So it really enables cultural heritage collections to more easily share the collections with the API, the application programming interface. So sort of step-by-step international. So these are cultural heritage institutions, university libraries, GLAM institutions all across the world. You can see the different examples that we have there, the BNF, the American Library of Congress, the Österreichische Nationalbibliothek, the British Museum Europeana, and many more. It's also focused on images. What I think is really cool about IIIF, if you haven't used it, is it allows you to zoom in on an image, because we all have this problem. We're reading, say, a paleographic document from the 16th century, and it's very hard to read. So we want to zoom in so we can figure out what the hell this letter means. Sometimes it's hard to do because you don't have that very good resolution. Because if you give the high resolution to begin with, it's going to take so long to load the page, and there's going to be so much data that's transferred and so much waste that happens that people will get frustrated and leave. So IIIF is a way to come around this. With the API, it allows you to zoom in. When it makes that zoom, it will only request the image that you're looking for. So it will only do the zoom of that particular part of the document, and that way you get the high quality without having to download the entire document. Now, of course, since 2020, IIIF now supports audiovisual. The way IIIF, if you've ever looked into the way the URL works, you can see that it has, length and width. It's at a third dimension, which is now time. Interoperability. So any viewer can be used to bring together a given manifest. What's really great is it's a rather simple API. I mean, it's something I can give to students and say, here, learn this. But it's incredibly powerful, because what it really allows us to do is you can digitally reconstruct manuscripts. How many times in the 19th century some rich asshole in the United States wanted to buy an illuminated manuscript, or worse off, cut out the illuminated part and left the manuscript behind, and now it was sitting on his wall in Massachusetts. Has now been donated to a library. We want to put the manuscript back together. Well, with IIIF, you can do this. You can do their image request for the digitized illumination. You can do the image request for the manuscript that's still there, and you can reunify this page back together. You can reunify entire manuscript collections and books back together. And interestingly, you can also encourage and compare different manuscripts across time. Whereas before, you'd have to go to London, to Paris, to Vienna to look at different things and take pictures. Now you can sit in the comfort of your pajamas at home and use IIIF to look at these documents. And of course, the framework is the APIs acting as the standards that ensure that this is possible. So now that I've finished selling you on IIIF, this online workshop, this is not an ad, I promise. It can be taken as a paid training session. And in all honesty, I did do this in September of 2020. It was one of the first ones that did. But what they've done, and I think is really great, and is really within the spirit of digital humanities and open science, is they put those materials online, and anyone can follow it. So if you type in IIIF, and I'm going to share my slides on Twitter after, so you can just slip up there later. But the materials are put on, and anyone can go in and do it. Anyone can follow through this program. And I decided to take advantage of this and take up a couple classes. It's less classes for me to prepare, but it's also something that's very useful. And what I decide to do is tell students, here's this program, you're going to follow it. And I sort of follow them through, and I give them this framework, but it's very self-driven. So what it is, it consists of a series of text with demonstration videos. It's Zoom captures of the various seances that were held. with external links to not only the API documentation, but also different tools, and it's hosted on GitHub pages. It's broken into 5 parts. There's a quick introduction to IIIF, quick and dirty. Then you have long sort of, it takes about, I'd say 2 hours to go through each of these next sections, about the image API and how it works, about the presentation API and how that works, and then finally how to add annotations and save your annotations. And then the final part is this project and presentation, because when this is taken on the online class, when I did it, I came with a couple institutions. There are people that are different libraries that want to show how they can use IIIF. But I asked students to imagine that they're working. This is something they're supposed to do. It is a professional master's degree, of course. So that they're working and they are being sent to this to learn how to use IIIF, to take it back to their institution and present to their colleagues and superiors. This is what IIIF is. This is what it can do for us. These are the advantages and disadvantages. So it adds, again, this sort of role-playing element that I think is a use case that they'll use future on in their careers. So they have to give a 10-minute presentation in English, of course, that has that has their series of images, how they've joined them together into a single manifest and annotate them, and as if it were a proof of concept to their colleagues back at their fictional archive, library, or research lab. So it uses a couple different tools that I think are really great, and especially this IIIF workbench is something that when I taught this class for the first time in 2021, didn't exist yet. Glenn Robson was still in the process of developing it. Last year when I taught this in 2022 or this spring, it was finally available. And what it does is it takes advantage of the limited hosting availability on GitHub, so up to 1 gigabyte. And it's a service that allows you to automatically upload your images, and it will automatically break them down into the tiles and make them IIIF compliant. So it becomes the server, the IIIF server that runs off of the GitHub pages. And again, this idea that creates the tiles when you zoom in, you can see these 2 tiles. I decided not to do a live demo because that can always go horribly poor. But you can zoom in and you can see, okay, this is the signature of Marie de Médicis, who's the Queen of France. And you can zoom in and see that. And you can see for yourself, and you can go through and play around with the demo that I put together for my students. But there's some other tools. There's the body and manifest editor that really allows you to go through and create your manifest. So the manifest for you is, manifest is think of as like the big jar that you put the different images into. The images are referred to as canvas because canvas is like a painting canvas, and that's where you will paint your annotations onto. And then all those images go into the jar, which is called the manifest. And the manifest is what links these together. It's what allows you to take something that may be in Munich, Rome, and Paris and put them together in one manifest that will bring them and unite them together. Now, of course, doing this usually is done when you're doing this in a professional setting is done by machines. You're not going in and typing the JSON code. But the thing that I ask the students to do is to go through, and for these 4 images that they use, is to do it by hand. Because once you do it by hand, once you get into the code and see how it works, that's how they get to learn and understand how this works. That's where they can say, okay, save, test it. And when it doesn't work, they're like, oh shit, what did we do wrong? And then they can get in and see how things change and adapt as you're going forward. There's also Mirador, which is one of the standard IIIF viewers, and it's interesting because it's used. Ooh, the images didn't work out there well, but the SAS is the simple annotation server that uses Mirador to allow students to create the annotations, export them, and then upload them into the system. So it really is a complete package that allows you to go through, create your hosting, then go through and make your annotations, point them together, and then you end up with a perfectly valid project. I also wanted to spend some time here and go through the student presentations, just 2 quick examples from students that I've gotten their permission ahead of time. I'm still friends with them. So they're very happy to be here, virtually, I suppose. So this is one student, DARIAH-HR, that was very interested and still remains very interested in the city of Rome and wanted to look at maps of Rome across the medieval and early modern period to see how the city evolved. So she goes through and creates the manifest. You see these images that come from the 15th, 16th, 18th and 19th century, how Rome, the city evolves. You can take these high quality images that you can zoom in, and that's where maps get interesting, is when you can really zoom in and get to see how these different things work. And you can see the comparison across time. So you see the examples with the Pantheon, with the Castel Sant'Angelo. She can add the annotations, and she can see you're able, as well with annotations, you can put tags. So you can make that annotation say, this is the Colosseum, this is the Colosseum. You can see that comparison throughout time. And there's also a search service in IIIF that allows you to do a search, and will show where the Colosseum shows up on each of these images. And then, of course, what becomes quite interesting is you can see the evolution of the basilica across time. So you see the old basilica, which was built by Constantine, then it starts to get replaced, and it's replaced by sort of the Baroque monument that caused so much problems when they were trying to get the financing with Martin Luther up in Germany. You can also see the destruction of the Colosseum, and finally the discovery of the Palatine ruins. There was another project that was done in this past year by Margot Faure that was sort of trying to figure out this problem of, there was this library. She found that we know it exists. We have the administrative paperwork, but people kind of forgot where it was in the actual Sorbonne Université. So she went through with time and used the different stamps to figure out where it was. So these two stamps, one was the Bibliothèque Albert Dumont, and the other one was the Bibliothèque Ernest Lavis. The Bibliothèque Lavis is still existing today. And sort of went through time, and with IIIF was able to go with the metadata and say, okay, this book was published in this date and it has this stamp, and continue to do the different stamps and see the way these things were worked, and figure out in the time. When you go through the presentation of the metadata, and you can see with the location of the presentation with the maps, and you can link in different photos in your annotations, as well as you can see here as well, you have the different tags that can come through. So she did a really interesting project there, and this is based on she worked with the Bibliothèque Lavis. So this was something that I think is we'll see here. What's interesting is that it's engaging the students. So what have students gotten out of this? What have they learned? First of all, in most forms, it gives a working familiarity with IIIF and also what an API is. When I took this program, we had a theoretical class on what an API was, an application programming interface. I had no idea what it was. It was very theoretical. It wasn't concrete. Once I took this IIIF platform, I understand what an API is, how it works, how it's constructed, how it allows the technical framework to allow to send data back and forth. So I think that's very useful. But it also gives a holistic English language experience, because after all, this is an English language course that I'm teaching them. So it allows them to demonstrate their mastery of reading and oral comprehension through the text as well as the videos. But it also, in their annotation, proves that they have the written composition skills to communicate their information properly. And then finally, with the presentations, it really has them a chance to speak orally and engage in some oral communication. The training seminar also gives students a real-life practice in taking an English language training seminar. If DARIAH were to put together a training material, it would not be done in French or German or Croatian. If it was hosted at the European level, we'd probably do it in English. Now we can get into a debate about the multilinguality aspects of that, and that's very important. But the simple fact is, you're going to need English if you're going to move forward with this sort of thing. So it gives them a real practice. They're not going to be afraid to say, oh, I can't do this, it's in English. They'll have the experience already to say, okay, I've done this before, I've seen this. And also, I sort of cruelly leave them on their own. Like, I'll give them hints, but I tell them, okay, no, go into the doc. This is where you can read in the documentation, or you should read this file. I'm not going to give them the answer right away, because I want them to get used to the idea of they have to show up on their own and figure out where the solution can be found in the documentation, in the troubleshooting. And then finally, like I said, it's engaging the students, because what I do is I tell them, pick the images that you want to work with. Pick something that pick something that you're personally invested in. I say, hell, if you want, use your photos from vacation and tell me about what a great time you had on the beach. I don't care, but it has to be something that they're engaged with, because they spend quite a bit of time with these images. So it has to be a project they're actually and truly interested in. And oftentimes it ends up being a continuation of research in the master's or PhD thesis, or a manifestation of a hobby or personal interest. So that's what I have to say about IIIF. I'm the only person here available for questions, and the rotten fruit can be found outside. So we'll go on to the next presentation as you prepare the ways to grill me. Thank you so much.